At the beginning of the film, Dodge is situated in a high-tech waiting room belonging to Tire Fund. As a real estate developer from Detroit, he's facing bankruptcy due to his overwhelming debt and about to be financially decimated. The root of his financial concerns is a negligent investment that he made by acquiring the Carrington, an obsolete high-rise office building, which has not been profitable enough to be sold. Dodge's property is in such a declining state that it has been difficult for him to secure tenants, and regrettably he lacks the finances necessary to renovate his building. Val and Dodge were confronted with unexpected financial issues when they found out that their first baby was on the way. When informed by his secretary about a meeting called for him by Miles Sellers, the company's chief, Dodge nervously entered into his daunting office in trepidation. To Dodge's astonishment, it seemed like Miles already had prior knowledge of their delicate economic state before any discussion even began. Miles attempted to entice Dodge with the promise of becoming an instant multimillionaire if he agreed to participate in a deadly game. Initially, Dodge was reluctant as he couldn't comprehend why anyone would put themselves at risk for such little reward. However, when faced with his financial desperation and urged on by Miles' alluring offer of money, Dodge eventually overcame his reservations and accepted the challenge set before him. The next scene in the series dives into a flashback of just days prior, capturing Dodge's fateful encounter with Miles and how he was drawn into this deadly game. Before then, Dodge had been famously known as an incredible track star at University of Michigan, one that routinely broke records. As the early morning broadcast announcing Dodge's record-breaking run on the city streets echoes, he experiences agonizing headaches. Returning home from his jog and attempting to make breakfast reveals how debilitating his illness is. As he drops eggs onto the kitchen floor, it becomes evident that even a simple task has become too difficult for him. When he met Dodge and his pregnant wife Val, it became abundantly clear that he was in a stressful situation. His late bills for medication had yet to be paid, demonstrating how unwell he really was, particularly when one considers the importance of being prepared for the baby. Val stands firmly by her husband's side even though his job is falling through. Together they are sure they can get through this. Later, the couple goes to Luger's bar. Dodge's best friend, who has also lost money in an investment with him yet still remains sympathetic and encouraging towards his buddy. As Dodge traipsed along the sidewalk one day, he suddenly clutched his head and crumpled to the ground in agony. He was then taken to a hospital where physicians declared that he had terminal brain cancer with an inoperable tumor inside his skull. Dismayed, Dodge and Val depart from the hospital when a nurse hands him a business card for Tire Fund. She informs him that this particular company provides financial aid to those with terminal illnesses, perhaps his last hope of finding solace in an impossible situation. When Dodge discloses the devastating news of his illness to Val, she is understandably shocked. He then goes on to explain that he was forced to sell off both health and life insurance policies for financial aid in order to foot some business expenses. Dodge and Val have experienced the most unfortunate of circumstances, with their parents having passed away and no financial support from anyone. The film then brings us to today's reality, where they both work in the same office building. Miles reveals to Dodge the dangerous game he's about to partake in, a 24-hour hunt where each hour that Dodge survives, his pay rate will increase. Knowing this information, it is now up to Dodge whether or not he can make it through alive and reap the rewards of his success. He has the opportunity to win a staggering $24.5 million if he can successfully navigate his way through the game and dodge all of its obstacles. This money will be deposited into an anonymous account in Dodge's name, which he is able to access at any time in order to monitor that the deposits are being made on an hourly basis. Miles has divulged that the hunters in-game are elite, wealthy customers with a penchant for killing humans and making them their prey. As Dodge plays, he won't be able to identify these predators. They could come in any form or gender, until they reveal themselves when launching an attack. Dodge has no way of predicting how many hunters will be coming after him, which means they can easily surprise and ambush him. It is even possible that more than one hunter may go after Dodge at the same time. Miles elucidates another rule: once the game starts, there's no pausing or stopping it for any reason. If he discloses his involvement in the game or attempts to leave town, these rules will remain active until death. Should he fail to comply, the unending nature of this treacherous endeavor shall extend far beyond expectations. The hunters have every weapon at their disposal, except guns, to hunt Dodge down, plus Dodge is not allowed to tell anyone about this game. Miles tries hard to convince Dodge that even if he dies during the match, his death will be worth it. With the money from Dodge's participation in the game, Val and their unborn child will be financially secure for many years to come. Though it takes some convincing on behalf of those presenting him with this offer, a desperate Dodge eventually decides to agree despite his initial hesitation. After Jerry Pierce, a highly sought-after business investor, declined Dodge's plea to invest in his heavily indebted Carrington building, he made the decision to move forward with his plan. That night, Dodge fibbed to Val that he had a great transaction with Pierce and mentioned he would be heading out for a run. Next, at the diner, Miles joined him and their game began just before dawn at 6:46 a.m. Miles steals Dodge's possessions, excluding his medication and an ultrasound of his child. To make things worse, he gives him a phone to monitor his whereabouts. It sends out updates on Dodge's location every hour for 15 seconds at a time, making it easier for the hunters to track him down. As Dodge is running around town, desperately attempting to stay alive, Val notices sizable bank deposits appearing in his account. The thrilling game commences as he runs into Nixon, a dapper British gentleman, inside of a mall restroom. Fortunately, Dodge manages to get away unscathed from the first hunter. However, soon after he meets Reagan, a wild southern cowboy and one of many hunters on his tail. At this juncture, Val uncovers Pierce's refusal to back their building venture and reaches out to Luger for assistance. She grasps that Dodge is in a precarious situation and likely embroiled with something unlawful, an explanation as to why he has not returned home. Miles is abetted by his sinister sidekick, Connell, who arrives whenever a crime scene needs to be tidied and evidence disposed of. The Tire Fund headquarters in Detroit ensures that the game remains covert with an abundance of high-tech computer systems tracking Dodge's every move, no matter if he is on 4 wheels or 2 feet. Now they can see which streets he's walking down even when not traveling in any form of transportation. In a riveting turn of events, Dodge extrudes the clutches of his predators and jumps on board a train. His next destination, a venerable church that he visits in order to atone for his transgressions. As he kneels inside the confession booth, confessing to an unseen priest that he is incapable of escaping this dark abyss, he finds himself surrounded by both dread and despair as reality creeps up once more. Val and Luger, in their foolishness, journey to the bank branch where Dodge has an account with the intent of figuring out who is responsible for making these mysterious deposits. Unfortunately, they only provoked suspicion among themselves as well as others, leading them to hastily escape when the desk worker proposed calling upon a supervisor. When Dodge fails to respond to Val's calls, she grows suspicious and dials the police for help. However, they are unable to file a missing person report due to lack of evidence. In the church, meanwhile, Dodge mistakenly punches one of the devotees, assuming he is part of the hunters' gang. When Dodge discovers that the priest is actually one of the hunters, his identity being a psychologist named Carter, all vibes in the room instantly change. How did he know where to find me? The answer comes swiftly: he'd utilized my background profile as a guide. In an attempt to apprehend him, Carter lashes out at Dodge with his hammer and injures him before they get into a tussle. After fighting valiantly against each other, Dodge manages to trap Carter in confinement, although not without getting hit himself by said hammer on his leg. Right outside the church, Connell discovers what is going on and quickly informs his boss Miles. Due to Dodge's leg injuries, he can no longer run away and instead hastily treats himself while coming up with a plan, blending in among a throng of spectators who have just finished watching a game at the stadium nearby. As Nixon follows Dodge, he soon spots him in the crowd. Luckily for Dodge, he is able to get into a family's car trunk and avoid capture, at least temporarily. Meanwhile, back home Val anxiously awaits any contact from her husband. When she searches his file for clues, she finds the Tire Fund business card. Realizing that the same family is driving towards Birmingham means one thing: Dodge will have broken their rules if he reaches there safely. Startled to find a strange person in the trunk, he quickly alerted his family. His husband then took action and lunged at Dodge but was instead met with an assault from him. The wife speedily reported what had just happened to the police, while Dodge apologized for his impulsive actions before fleeing swiftly away. As he made his way home in a stolen cab, the pursuit still hadn't ended. Just as he was heading inside his house, a menacing biker came up behind him and attempted to attack with a metal rod. Val, who had been anxiously waiting for her husband's return, was disturbed by this scene and rushed to inform Luger of the danger at hand. In a rush, Dodge jumped into the cab and sped away as Carter pursued him. When all hope seemed lost for Dodge, he managed to outmaneuver his pursuer by quickly veering off course and crashing into a nearby tree, remarkably escaping with only minor injuries. After the psychologist threatens to sexually assault, he kills Carter. Val Connell becomes aware of the situation, takes care of Carter's body, and updates Miles about it. While Val traces the business card to its mentioned location, she discovers that the Tire Fund building is empty. On the other hand, Dodge continues to be followed by Reagan, so he boards a tour ship. However, Dodge finds himself in a fight when he realizes that the stewardess on the ship is another hunter named Kennedy. Being a martial arts expert, Kennedy easily gains the upper hand in the fight, but just as she is about to kill Dodge, he managed to set her clothes on fire. Afterward, he throws her into the water and escapes via a nearby bridge. In this scene, two criminals grab Dodge and notice his phone with the $15 million in bank account. They soon realize that he only has fake medication and demand money instead. As unexpected as it may be for him, they don't want anything else from him but cash, even though he tries to explain his situation further. Dodge is almost beaten to a pulp until the fifth and last hunter, LBJ, appears. He starts shooting at the thugs, killing most of them in short order. When he's about to take out Dodge too, one of the injured gangsters takes his chance from behind and kills LBJ instead. This gives Dodge an opportunity to escape, however Nixon quickly follows him for revenge. As Connell arrived on the scene, he had to quickly work to conceal any evidence before getting caught by law enforcement. Dodge was able to successfully evade being apprehended and then went directly to a hospital where an examining nurse found that his medication was counterfeit and there were no records of him ever receiving treatment at this location. He contacts Miles, who confesses that Dodge is not terminally ill and was framed to accept the challenge. Miles unveils Luger as the one who accepted $50,000 to medicate Dodge. However, it appears that all of the rules still remain in place. In a flash, Dodge contacts Val to let her know that they were outsmarted and his cancer was phony. He informs her that Luger is in on the scheme before warning her to stay away from him. Unfortunately, almost immediately after this conversation, Val is abducted by fake cops and taken captive by Miles. Dodge lays a trap for the remaining hunters Nixon, Reagan, and Kennedy in his father's abandoned construction shop. One by one, they enter only to be ensnared. The first to face off against Dodge is Reagan, who ends up pinned down with a beam that draws blood from his hand. Later, Kennedy goes after her target but is killed by Luger, who happens to be in the right place at the right time. Luger clarifies that Miles was merely bluffing about drugging Dodge. The two then leave the building, but not before Dodge blows up the shop, killing Reagan. Meanwhile, Nixon manages to escape, but when Carnell arrives to clean up the mess, Dodge attacks him and demands to know Val's whereabouts. Connell reveals that Miles had set up their base at the Carrington. After his high-rise development project fails, Dodge wastes no time and heads straight to the Carrington, where he finds Val tied up with the couple in an abandoned building. Finally reuniting with each other, their moment is cut short by Nixon. Dodge is chased to the rooftop, where in the ensuing fight, he falls off and hangs from the building's ledge. Nixon prepares to kill Dodge by stabbing his hand, but then he catches a glimpse of the sunrise. He puts his weapon away and politely helps Dodge back on his feet. After 24 hours, the game is finally over. Nixon congratulates Dodge for playing a good game before walking away. Val reunites with Dodge, who receives a final call from Miles congratulating him on winning the game and the money.